Good morning. So I'm sitting there this morning going, what am I going to do for Deadline TV for this month? And I had just posted, which we'll get into in a second, a selection of screenshots of newspaper articles. These are mainstream newspaper articles. I'm not actually, the purpose of the exercise was not to make any other fact than to let people see the headlines, draw themselves. There is literally no comment on any of this, other than the very beginning. I basically say, what's Helen Clark, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Rishi Sunak, Christchurch Foundation got in common? Quite a lot, actually. Okay, and the newspaper articles basically demonstrate the connections. So there's literally not a case of making any wild statement. Facebook comes along about 5 minutes after turning around and says, this information contains partly the false information. You'll be pushed to the lower of the feeds, which is kind of ironical, really, because in case you're not anywhere of me, which, look at the number of hits this feed gets, I'm pushed down pretty low. And I used to have 135,000 people would come and visit my site each month. Now I'm down to 400 a month. It is what it is. And I don't really care. I've had a pretty damn good career throwing hand grenades in, so, we just poke the bear and do what we want and just enjoy life and go all to hell with you all. But the point is, first of all, this Facebook thing is, it doesn't explain what is the false information. It doesn't explain. These are 50 screenshots of newspaper articles. What's false? What any of those articles are false have literally come from mainstream reporting newspaper articles. And even if there was, because let's face it, mainstream can get things wrong as well, even if it was, why not explain what the cause of the false information? Because it's nothing to do with false information, because ultimately what I was actually pointing out, and Facebook's behavior kind of did me a really great favor, was basically, when we look at the issue of the Epstein tape, and that right now the Democrats have a field time because Donald Trump is getting caught all the time. He's mentioned in different papers and shown link, and it's looking pretty bad for him. And everyone's and the MAGA are upset by this because he won't release the files. A couple of things in it. First of all, everyone is missing the point. What was if there was a blackmailing network, what was its entire function? And our second point is that, yes, it's very clear that we understand that Donald Trump is going through, and he's, I think, 1,000 personnel looking for any documents where he's flagged. So again, contradicts what he's saying, and he's the whole fake hoax. And this is all part of the high drama. Because at the same time, no one's pointing out that, well, wait a minute, Epstein had very close connections to the Clinton administration as well. Also, the issue of this Israel, again, it's like they're talking about, they talk about Donald Trump, but listen very closely. The Democrat media doesn't want to talk about the fact that Donald has this relationship with Israel, technological companies. Now, one of the things I actually put in my thing that got flagged as false was a whole bunch of newspaper articles about Cob Web Technologies, which, in the same vein of Harvey Weinstein, connected NSO and Black Cube and Peter Thiel's Carbine 911 and Rishi Sunak's brother-in-law's creation of the social credit system in China, which people say doesn't exist, other people say does exist. It does actually exist, and it's at the stage, it's not as horrific as the people made out, but that's because that's stage one. And again, when we look at what's happening with ICE, contact, the immigration, and the page I was looking at today was now what happens. So they've got this happening in the New Zealand police as well. It's that they can hold a camera up to you and go click and identify you by facial recognition by the stuff that you go through airports. Now, technically speaking, you should be able to walk down the street unless a police officer turns around and says, sorry, you've been detained because we're issuing you for blah, blah, blah. You shouldn't be required to give that's the whole point of the checks and balances. Yet this technology is actually rapidly undoing those whole principles of the checks and balances of democracy. In New Zealand, again, one of the things I pointed out, not pointed out, I just used the newspaper articles, which was the Christchurch Foundation is linked to an organisation called the Tel-Aviv Foundation. Now, what the core of this is about is that they want to come up with global cities, digital cities, also on a digital currency system, just like Sushi Rindic is actually talking about. Now, These are the things that were promoted under the left when the Clintons were also funding, they're talking about 50-minute cities, which is things like the Agenda 2030, which were very much supported by Labour and the Democrats, and they go, oh no, that's all nonsense, that's all conspiracy theory. Now Donald Trump's rolling out a thing called freedom cities, which is also what they use in Israel for their concentration camps, and everyone's losing their expletives over the freedom cities because these are concentration camps. They're just like what Israel's doing to the people of Palestine. Guess what? They're the same thing. And that's the whole point. Yes, this is technology that, with checks and balances, can provide amazing benefits to society. This is not what's happening. Julian Carver, who did the geospatial for the Red Zone in Christchurch, amazing guy who ran a thing called Open Ninjas, and he talked specifically about geospatial data. That this is one technology that can stop flooding, mitigate climate change, but he says it has to be done transparently, otherwise it's a very evil, dangerous technology. Julian Carver was actually abducted off the streets. He was taken to a mental asylum. He died in care of mental asylum. There was newspaper articles that there was going to be inquiry into about what happened. Far as I'm aware, 8 years later, Julian Carver just disappeared, and nobody is talking about how this guy, father of a family who ran a multi-million-dollar company, had no record or indications of any erratic behaviour. Poof, just disappeared, just like that. And nobody wants to talk about Julian Carver. Okay, back to the Christchurch Foundation. The Christchurch Foundation basically was this charity set up by Humphrey Rolleston, man with very, very strong connections to South Canterbury finance, had very, very strong connections to Israeli military companies. Again, I've got a whole entire chapter devoted to the South Canterbury finance headquarters and what was in those buildings and what connections. And that was published a year before South Canterbury finance actually went down, 2 years in fact. South Canterbury finance's co-partner was actually Alan Hubbard, and Alan Hubbard is a partner in the Panama Papers with George Silvanus Robinson, who's one of the founding members of the Policy Exchange, which is a far right-wing think tank that basically wants to bring about the social credit system that Sushi Ridnick is, and with it, I'm assuming, the 50-minute cities. The Christchurch Foundation's also partnered up, which was founded by, Humphrey Rolleston. It's partnered up with the Tel-Aviv Foundation, and they would bring Hilda Ardern, who's from the Tel-Aviv Foundation, to New Zealand, where she would talk about basically global cities, which again are freedom cities, 50-minute cities, run by that basically allow a digital and financial monopoly. This is what the whole point. This is what the whole point about what we're not talking about really is about the Epstein is what was the point of the blackmailing system? It's about utilizing financial systems so that money can be washed through it, and also basically creating the situation so that people are moving towards it and not turning around and go, wait a minute, I think that's not such a good idea. And so someone wastes a photo, goes, you sure about it? Look at these photos. Oh yeah, I think these cities are a really, really good idea. And the whole point is the blackmailing is not occurring on the left or the right. It's happening on both sides. So when you look at New Zealand, the Tel-Aviv Foundation, by the way, has very, very strong ties to the Clinton Initiative and to the Clinton Global Initiative. I'm talking basically, my post is about the money trail, and that's what got flagged as false information. Even though I didn't say anything, these are the headlines. Here is Cob Web's technology getting hired by the New Zealand government. Here is Christchurch Foundation connected up Tel-Aviv Foundation. Oh look, Tel-Aviv Foundation is connected to the Clinton administration. Oh look, Tel-Aviv Foundation is connected to Nathan Jacobson. Go look him up. What a piece of scumbag. And he's a very close friend with Erik Prince. And of course, when you look at the blue model for RICS 84B, which is really the foundation, RICS 84B, Total Information Awareness. This is what this is all about. Total 84B wanted to create concentration camps, basically round up minorities. Effectively, at the end of the day, discovered they didn't have enough personnel that would go along with the plan. Too many people had ethics. But the idea was that was even the plan was that it was going to partner up the US forces with basically privatised militaries, just like kind of like Erik Prince's Blackwater, and again very much like what we're seeing with the ICE, which is it's state and federal, but effectively it's a way to augment the military side of it and get around things like posse comitatus. The budget now for ICE is now 3 times what it is for the US Marines. Think about that. Let that sink in. Okay? And again, that advanced budget, which has been going towards ICE, and at the moment it's losing their expletive over Donald Trump, this was also approved by the Biden Foundation. Sorry, not the Biden Foundation, by the Biden administration, who, again, there's a nice little... wow, aren't these guys doing a great little thing there, Biden doing his, congratulating the Tel-Aviv Foundation. So again, left wing, right wing, left wing, right wing. Now, at the time when the Clinton administration, which would end up basically through both the Jacinda Ardern, who's been a lovely facey photo there with Hillary Clinton, and then there's a great little speech there about Hillary Clark going, isn't the Clinton Global Initiative doing so well? Ah! Again, and she was also the one that supported Vision 2030. Vision 2030 got exposed as basically a blueprint for tyranny, digital tyranny, in the Arab world, when Jamal Khashoggi, who was tracked using Pegasus technology, which again is very similar to the technology developed under PROMIS, which was again technology that was appropriated by the effectively the Heritage Foundation clique surrounding the Iran Contra affair, that were heavily, deeply involved. And again, they're the ones that are now advocating this Vision 2025, which is what Donald Trump is rolling out, which is the same thing as Agenda 2030, the global... It's in fact, look behind the corporate side of Agenda 2030, it's corporate. So as people keep going, oh, I'm going to vote for left, stop the right-wing freedom cities, and then they go to the left and they actually embrace the 15-minute cities, which are the same thing as the freedom cities. Do you get it? So at the time I was talking about when the New Zealand government, both under the Key government and both under the Jacinda Ardern government, were funding the Clinton administration, a guy called Jared Thebold, who's a bass guitar in a band called the Axemen, ran into a bit of problems because he was trying to do a bit of whistleblowing in the IRD, and nobody would pay any attention to him, and his bosses were telling him, shut your mouth, just do your job. So he ended up driving his car through the window of the tax department at night time, made sure for a friend in the janitor. There's no one in the building, so it was a very peaceful act of protest. And what he wanted to do was expose basically all this dodgy money laundering that was going through the IRD in Christchurch about the same time that the Christchurch Foundation was being set up, that was partnered up with the Tel-Aviv Foundation, which is partnered up with the Clinton administration, which we know was actually getting money from the New Zealand government under both the John Key administration and the Jacinda Ardern administration. So that didn't kind of really work out the way that Jared wanted to talk about, and he was sworn by... he's doing this protest within the legal means available to him, so he can't actually identify. All he could tell me was that he was trying to blow the whistle on dodgy, very irregular charity donations by very rich listers in Christchurch, and there's not many rich listers in Christchurch, and they were donating money to what he described as being very, very senior American political candidates. So he was basically saying money that was going into the American presidency, which is, of course, we've seen this with James Raiardi. We got all those photos of him shaking Bill Clinton's hand in 1990 during the APEC conference when Bill Clinton was wanted for, James Raiardi was wanted for 123 illegal donations to the Clinton administration. And again, that was from China. And we see that all the way back to that again also happening with Richard V. Allen. Basically, he was under the investigation by the CIA in the 1960s for donating money to the Nixon administration at the time when, through the Bush connections, Bush and oil companies, they were developing a special relationship between America and China. And Richard V. Allen, who went on to be the secretary or the national security advisor to Ronald Reagan, and was also very heavily involved in the Iran Contra affair, he always kept Reagan on that one China policy. So, again, when we look at Peter Thiel and his connections to China, you'll find that everybody is involved in this game. China is running their own social credit system. It's the system has been designed by Rishi Sunak, who's clearly heavily involved in the policy exchange, which again, they've got ties into things like the Atlas Network, again, the Heritage Foundation. So it's all of these rich conservatives at the top all around the world, not just Israel, not just Democrats, not just Republicans, not just Chinese, not just British, not just New Zealanders. All of these people, all this effectively corporate control, want to use this technology to bring about a digital version of Rex 84, which is basically monitored by a 2.0 version of Total Information Awareness, which was created by Admiral Poindexter, one of the people to be pardoned by William Barr, who William Barr effectively was also the person that sort of said, let's go and invade Noriega. His son was his son was the one that actually, his father was the one that actually hired Epstein to work at the Dalton School. And then when William Barr went on to be part of the Bush administration, which then again got cleared. Vice President Bush and President Reagan got cleared of any wrongdoing in the Iran Contra cartel, which was again running their own foreign exchange policy with the intention of ultimately creating martial law by this Rex 84 model. And they brought in Senator John Towers to carry out the investigation. Wonderful picture of Senator John Towers with Donald Trump, Robertt Maxwell, who's the guy involved with the UK papers, but also made his money doing technology backwards from east and west, making sure that the elites on both sides had the technology to keep their people under control. And was again linked very much connected to the PROMIS and had lots of meetings with Epstein, who was of course going around having these very meetings with Hawkins and other mathematicians, because what they were looking for was they needed the mathematical data for effectively running a massive AI controlled system, which that's quantum computing. So you've got to know a lot about maths, and that takes a lot of power, and it takes a lot of money, and of course none of this money can be done legally, so it has to be done through money laundering and through sources of black incomes. And these are things like really at the end of the day what the Clinton Global Initiative was all about. It was effectively a laundering network designed by Jeffrey Epstein, who also went on to he did the Clinton Initiative. He helped design that. He had a hand in the Robin Hood Foundation, which is the John Griffin, who's the guy that gave Jacinda Ardern her mansion that she was going to get married up in Hawke's Bay. He ran. So when people always ask Jacinda, what was the soup kitchen you ran for exactly? Oh, it sounds so wonderful. What exactly did you do, and what exactly was the name of this organisation? You won't tell us. Oh, but you've got John Griffin, the head of the Robin Hood Foundation, which has got all these guys like Oprah and Diddy and all these celebrities linked to Harvey Weinstein, who was currently going around using Black Cube to basically, you do what I say, or else I'll expose the dirt on you, and using technology to wield influence. We don't have journalists anymore. We have influencers who gets to be heard or who doesn't get to be heard depends on the algorithm, which is a classic example today. They didn't like what I say, so they called it false, they called it fake news, wouldn't explain why it was fake news, and I got pushed to the bottom of the feed. That's what we're all heading for, people. Don't believe it about it being left-wing or right-wing, blue, red pill. The question is, at the end of the day, what needs to be asked about is, where is the money? Who is the auditing over these charities? In New Zealand, we changed the charity tax laws so they went from you could only donate $1,000 to $5,000 maximally and get a 2.5% receipt rebate. Under John Key's system, they changed it to 33% and the sky was the limit. Using that same system, the Robin Hood Foundation, you can donate $1 and you'll get a $48 rebate. They've actually figured out how these charities can actually steal money from the system, from the tax department, and give to the rich. There's no giving to the poor, and most of the money in terms of the Christchurch Foundation, right up until 2011, began after 2 years after Christchurch earthquake, right up until the Christchurch shooting, 2019, didn't make a single dollar go to charity. Every single dollar was tied up in tax costs, but they got tax rebates for the people making the charities who were wanting to use it to promote in council the idea of these digital cities run by digital currency. Wow, using our own money to sell us into slavery. And of course, what happened? Well, let's have a look at the Christchurch Foundation. I mean, okay, I said just up then the shooting occurred, they got donated $11 million. Lots of people in the mosque themselves are saying, hey, we never saw a cent. There's something wrong here. And you've got to really go and understand the history of the Christchurch Mosque, which is actually the Saudi mosque, goes all the way back to the Iran Contra affairs. Most of the people that set it up were from sort of Saudi Arab Emirates. Then later on, people came from Africa and Asia. And the ones that were the poorer people, they're the ones that are applying corruption. They're the ones saying, we didn't get a cent. The ones at the top that have those Saudi connections, oh no, they're all just troublemakers. And then the hero of the day, suddenly because he's also joining with the people at the poor, saying this is nonsense, this is rotten. Suddenly they change they change the script, and he goes from being the hero to being the bad guy. But at the end of the day, there's actually nothing actually on him. Cool dude, by the way.